She walked into the wrong room. That was how it started. Not the summit. Not the panel. Not the rooftop dinner with 200 of the most powerful business minds on 4 continents. A wrong room. Zara Mensah, CEO of Zenith Tech, 14 countries, 3,000 employees. The woman whose name appeared on the cover of 3 international business publications in the same calendar year, walked into the wrong conference room on the 2nd floor of the Seoul Business Innovation Center at 9:47 on a Wednesday morning, and found herself standing at the front of a room full of 43 Korean real estate executives who were waiting for their 9:45 briefing and had just received something considerably more interesting. She looked at them. They looked at her. She looked at the room number on the door behind her. She looked at the room number on her summit schedule. She said, "Good morning. I understand this is not my panel." One of the executives in the front row said, "No, but please stay." The room laughed. Zara smiled. A real one. The kind she kept for moments that genuinely surprised her, which were rare enough that when they arrived they produced the full unmanaged version. She said, "I appreciate the enthusiasm. Unfortunately, I have somewhere to be." She paused. "But if any of you want to talk about technology-led urban development after lunch, I will be at the East Networking Lounge. Bring questions. Good ones." She left. In the corridor outside, she checked her schedule, found the correct room on the 4th floor, and walked toward the elevator with the particular composed efficiency of a woman who had just accidentally addressed the wrong audience and left them wanting more, and was not going to acknowledge that this was one of the most impressive things she had done all morning. In the briefing room she had just left, 43 Korean real estate executives were already Googling her name. One of them was Kwon Hyun-soo's senior project director, who texted his boss immediately. The text said, "The Zenith Tech CEO just walked into our briefing by mistake and in 30 seconds made everyone in the room wish she was our keynote speaker. Thought you should know." Hyun-soo read the text in the back of his car on the way to the conference center. He put his phone in his pocket. He looked out the window at his city. He said nothing, but he arrived at the conference center 4 minutes earlier than planned. Zara Mensah had built Zenith Tech from nothing, and the nothing was the important part of that sentence. Not from modest beginnings. Not from a small inheritance or a family connection or the right university network. From nothing. A borrowed laptop. A rented desk in a shared Lagos workspace that she paid for weekly because monthly was more than she had. A phone with a cracked screen she used to call investors who did not call back. She called again. She called again after that. She called until calling back was the path of least resistance. She had graduated at the top of her class in computer science, turned down 2 job offers that would have made her comfortable, and spent 6 months building a product that nobody asked for in a market that nobody had mapped yet. She had been told by 7 investors that the idea was interesting but the market was not ready. She had told herself that the market not being ready was the opportunity, not the obstacle, and had kept building. 8 years later, Zenith Tech was in 14 African countries. 3,000 employees. The most innovative technology company on the continent 3 years running. She had been named to 4 international lists of the most influential business leaders under 40. She had given a TED Talk that had 11 million views. She had testified before 2 African Union committees on technology policy. She had done all of this and she was 32 years old. And she had never once walked into a room that did not rearrange itself around her arrival. She had a morning ritual that nobody knew about. Every morning before the city woke up, she sat at her window wherever she was in the world and was completely still for 15 minutes. Not praying exactly. Not meditating in any formal sense. Simply still. She had started it at 24 when the terror of building something from nothing was so constant and so large that she needed somewhere to put it that was not her professional face. The stillness had been the thing that held her together in the years when everything else was held together with willpower and the particular stubborn refusal to fail that her mother had always called her most exhausting quality and her greatest asset simultaneously. She kept the morning stillness when she had everything because you do not stop doing the thing that got you through the hardest years. You keep it. You protect it. You never tell anyone about it because some things are only yours. She arrived in Seoul for the summit with a schedule her assistant had described as optimistic and that Zara had described as accurate. 7 meetings. 2 keynote commitments. 1 panel. 3 dinner obligations. A flight home Friday. She was not looking for anything in Seoul except productivity and a departure gate. She found both of those things. She also found something she was not looking for, which is, as every person who has ever found the most important thing in their life will tell you, exactly how it always happens. Subscribe to Afro Soul Tales right now. Welcome aboard. This is the home of African Korean love stories that will keep you in your seat. New story every Friday. Turn on your bell and drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from tonight? I want to know what city, what country, what corner of the world this story has found you in. Tell me. I read every one. Now, on the other side of Seoul. In a building he built. On a floor he designed. Behind a desk he chose because the window gave the specific quality of morning light he required for the specific quality of thinking he did before 8 a.m. Kwon Hyun-soo was 35 years old and Seoul was his city in the way that a city belongs to the person who has changed what it looks like from above. 3 of Seoul's most distinctive Skyline buildings bore his company's name. Not his name on a lobby plaque. His vision in the architecture. His insistence on a particular proportion in the facades that his engineers had called unnecessary 4 times and that he had maintained 4 times because he understood that the difference between a building that people look at and a building that people feel is almost always in the detail that someone called unnecessary. He had been told at 21 by his father, a man who had built a modest but respected construction business and believed that modest was the correct word for the ambitions of people of their background, that he was reaching too far. That the kind of empire he was describing did not belong to people like them. His father was a good man who loved him completely and was wrong about this specific thing. Hyun-soo had proceeded to build the empire, not out of spite, out of the specific quiet certainty of a person who knows what they are capable of and has decided that other people's ceilings are architectural problems to be solved rather than limits to be respected. He did not bow. He did not adjust his posture in rooms where other people expected deference because he had never been in a room where he was the one expected to defer. He had sat across tables from government ministers and international investors and had been the calmest person in the room every single time because calm was the specific frequency at which he operated and nothing had ever yet happened to change that frequency. He had a private habit. Every evening before bed he read for exactly 1 hour. Not business, not strategy, fiction, Korean literature, African novels, South American magical realism. He had started at 23 when the pressure of his first major development was so immense that he needed somewhere to go that was not inside his own relentless mind. He had kept the reading because the books were the place where he understood things about people that boardrooms never showed him, and understanding people had turned out to be as important as understanding buildings. Nobody knew about the evening reading. It did not fit the image of the most referenced man in Seoul real estate. The image was sufficient. He attended the summit every year. His company had built the conference center. He attended as a matter of professional courtesy to a city that had given him his skyline and to himself as the person most responsible for that skyline. He was not expecting anything unusual. He read his project director's text in the back of his car. He arrived 4 minutes early. Make of that what you will. The pre-summit dinner. Tuesday evening. Rooftop venue 22 floors above Seoul. 200 attendees from 40 countries. The food extraordinary. The view the kind that reminds powerful people what they are powerful in relation to. Zara arrived exactly on time. She was shown to her table. She sat. She looked at the place card to her left. Kwon Hyun-soo. She had heard the name. She knew 3 of the buildings. She had read a profile. She had filed it under significant regional player and moved on with her day. Hyun-soo arrived 4 minutes later. He was shown to his table. He sat. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the place card to his right. Zara Mensa, Zenith Tech Lagos, Nigeria. He had seen the growth report. He had thought exceptional execution or exceptional marketing, and had intended to find out which and had not yet found out. He turned right. She turned left. They looked at each other. 3 seconds of complete silence. Then they both said hello, at exactly the same moment. Neither of them smiled. Both of them wanted to. The dinner conversation moved through technology infrastructure and urban development and the challenges of building anything significant in Lagos versus Seoul. It was the most intellectually alive conversation either of them had been in for longer than they were prepared to measure. At one point he said, "The African tech market growth projection in that report you published last quarter. The 18% figure. That is optimistic." She looked at him. He looked at her. She said, "It is not optimistic. It is conservative. The actual growth in the markets we track is running at 23%. We published 18 because 18 is the number we can defend to a room full of skeptics. 23 requires a longer conversation than a report footnote." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "What is the longer conversation?" She said, "The longer conversation is that the infrastructure assumption underlying most international projections of African tech growth is built on 2015 data. The infrastructure has changed. The projections have not caught up. We are not projecting growth into an infrastructure deficit. We are tracking growth that is already happening in spite of conditions that the models say should prevent it. The models are wrong. The growth is right." The man on her other side, a German investment banker who had been about to say something, decided not to say it. Hyun-soo said, "What is the primary driver?" She said, "Mobile-first architecture. We skipped the desktop infrastructure stage entirely in most of our markets. That skip is not a deficit. It is an advantage. We built for the infrastructure that exists rather than the infrastructure that developed economies had in 1995. The products are different. The adoption curves are different. The models that predict our growth are running on assumptions that were built for a different technological evolution entirely. They keep being surprised by us. We keep not being surprised by being underestimated." The German investment banker had put down his fork. 2 other people at the table had stopped their own conversations. Hyun-soo said, "You said we." She said, "Yes." He said, "Not Zenith. We." She said, "When you build something that is genuinely yours, the pronoun becomes accurate regardless of the organizational structure." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Yes." 1 word. In the tone of someone who had just heard something they had thought without having the exact formulation for it. When the dinner ended, they stood outside waiting for their separate cars. He said, "It was an interesting evening." She said, "It was adequate." He looked at her. She looked at him. His car arrived. He got in. The car pulled away. She got into her own car and told her assistant, "Clear the hour after the breakfast meeting tomorrow morning." Her assistant said, "For what purpose?" She said, "For the purpose of it being cleared." On the other side of Seoul, Hyun-soo was in his car looking at nothing on his phone screen, thinking about a woman who called 3 hours and 17 minutes of the most interesting conversation he had been in for years adequate. He almost smiled. He did not. "Ladies and gentlemen, your captain speaking. We are cruising at altitude. Both passengers in seats 1 and 2 have just had the most interesting dinner of their professional lives and have called it adequate and interesting respectively. Weather ahead includes a summit panel that is about to become the most watched 23 minutes of the entire conference. Please keep your seatbelts fastened. Things are about to get considerably more interesting." The panel. Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. Topic: Cross-continental business development in the next decade. The moderator was a pleasant Korean economist who had prepared 12 questions. He used 2 of them. Hyun-soo said, "You cannot separate the infrastructure argument from the political will argument. The infrastructure requires the political will, and the political will requires the infrastructure to demonstrate its own value. It is circular." Zara said, "It is not circular. It is sequential, and the sequence matters. You build the demonstration first. Something small enough to be achievable and significant enough to be undeniable. The political will follows the evidence. It always follows sufficiently strong evidence. The problem is that most people wait for the political will before building the demonstration and then wonder why nothing changes." Hyun-soo said, "That assumes a political environment responsive to evidence." Zara said, "That assumes the political environment is the primary obstacle. In my experience, the political environment becomes the primary obstacle when people need an explanation for why they have not started. It is a sophisticated form of waiting for permission that has learned to call itself strategic analysis." Silence in the room. Hyun-soo said, "You are describing a failure of nerve as a failure of environment." She said, "I am describing what I have observed in 14 markets over 8 years. When we entered our first 3 markets, everyone told us the political environment was not ready. The political environment was not the obstacle. The willingness to proceed without certainty was the obstacle. We proceeded without certainty. The political environment adjusted to what we built. It always does when what you build is undeniable." Someone in the 3rd row said quietly in Korean to the person beside them, "Who is she?" The person beside them said, "Zenith Tech Lagos." The person said, "I need to get a meeting with her." The moderator tried his 3rd question. Nobody on the stage acknowledged it for 51 seconds. After the panel, a journalist stopped Zara in the corridor. She said, "Your response to Kwon Hyun-soo on the infrastructure sequencing question. Can you expand on that?" Zara said, "I already expanded on it. It is on the recording." The journalist said, "What did you think of his perspective overall?" Zara said, "He is not entirely wrong about the infrastructure argument. He is significantly wrong about the sequencing. The difference matters because if you accept his framing, you wait for conditions that may take a generation to arrive. If you accept mine, you build now and create the conditions yourself. One of those approaches has a 14-country track record. The other has a very impressive Seoul skyline." The journalist found Hyun-soo at the other end of the corridor. She asked the same question about Zara's perspective. He said, "She makes 3 genuinely excellent points. The 4th point requires examination. The 5th point is correct, but she does not yet know why it is correct. She is working from observation rather than mechanism. When she finds the mechanism, the 5th point becomes her strongest argument." The journalist said, "When do you think she will find the mechanism?" He said, "She already has it. She just used it to answer your question about the infrastructure argument and did not notice that she had answered 2 questions simultaneously." The journalist looked confused. Hyun-soo smiled slightly. He said, "Review the transcript. It is in there. 3rd paragraph of her infrastructure response." Both quotes appeared in the Summit Daily Briefing that evening. Both of them read it. Neither of them mentioned this to anyone. On Wednesday evening, he booked a reservation at a restaurant on the east side of the city. His assistant noted that the restaurant had a 3-month waiting list that his office had somehow bypassed and was not near the hotel, the conference center, or any location relevant to any scheduled meeting. His assistant had been his assistant for 6 years. His assistant made the reservation and sent one message. The message said, "Noted." On Thursday morning, Zara walked into the restaurant for a scheduled lunch with a Singaporean investor and found Kwon Hyun-soo at a corner table, reading his phone with the focused private expression of a man who believed he was alone. He looked up. She looked at him. He said, "Small city." She said, "It is one of the largest cities in Asia by population density." He said, "Sit down." She said, I have a lunch meeting. He said, your meeting is at 2. It is 12:27. Sit down. She sat down. They had lunch for 1 hour and 43 minutes. The Singaporean investor arrived at 2 and found them still at the table. He stood at the entrance for a moment. Zara's assistant, who was sitting nearby, leaned over to the investor's assistant and whispered, they have been like this since Tuesday. Just sit down somewhere and order something. They will notice you eventually. The investor's assistant whispered back, how long does eventually take? Zara's assistant said, unclear. New data set. At the rooftop closing event on Thursday evening, they spent 3 hours on opposite sides of the rooftop. Both of them completely aware of exactly where the other one was at every moment. Both of them having full conversations with other people using approximately 40% of their attention, while the remaining 60% maintained a precise real-time awareness of one specific person. A Seoul business journalist watching them from the bar said to a colleague, either those two are negotiating the most elaborate merger I have ever seen conducted through body language alone, or something considerably more interesting is happening. His colleague said, considerably more interesting. At 10:32 she went to the bar. At 10:34 he appeared beside her. He said, interesting summit. She said, it had its moments. He said, are you extending your stay? She said, I have meetings on Friday. He said, I did not ask about your meetings. She looked at him. He looked at her. Seoul blazed below them. She said, possibly. He said, good. He walked back to his conversation. She stood at the bar alone. She texted her assistant, move Friday's meetings to Monday. Her assistant replied in 11 seconds. All of them? She typed, all of them, and put her phone in her bag. Her assistant stared at the phone for a long moment, then typed back, understood, and immediately called their own therapist to process what had just happened. For extra days. Neither of them planned. Both of them arranged. Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Han River waterfront. Both of them walking independently. The city quiet. The light extraordinary. They saw each other from 50 meters. Both of them adjusted their routes without breaking stride, in the way that two people adjust routes when they intend to intersect but require the intersection to appear unplanned. They met at a point equidistant from where both had been and began walking in the same direction without either of them suggesting it. They walked for an hour. At some point she said, the hardest part of building something entirely yours is that it is entirely yours at every moment. There is no one to carry any part of it. Not even for an hour. She said this looking at the river. He said, yes. One word. The tone of someone who has thought this every day for 12 years and is saying it out loud for the first time. She did not look at him. He did not look at her. They walked in silence for 3 minutes. Then she said, there is a gallery on the south side. Contemporary Korean and African art. It opens at 10. He said, I know it. She said, I was planning to go at 10. He said, I may also be there at 10. For unrelated reasons. She said, of course. They both arrived at 9:58. The gallery attendant watched them arrive separately from opposite directions, make eye contact, and both proceed to look at the first painting with the studied concentration of people who had definitely not just coordinated their arrival. The attendant texted her colleague in the back room. The text said, they are here again. Her colleague replied, which ones? She replied, the ones who pretend they are not together. Her colleague replied, they were here yesterday too? She replied, they were at the building tour on Friday and the waterfront on Thursday and the restaurant on Thursday lunch and the rooftop event Thursday evening and the hotel restaurant Friday night. I know because my friend works the hotel restaurant and she told me. Her colleague replied, are they together? She replied, they are absolutely not together. They are also absolutely together. It is the most exhausting thing I have ever watched and I love it completely. The hotel restaurant on Friday evening. The bill arriving between them. Both hands landing on it simultaneously. 3 seconds. Neither moving. then both releasing at the same moment. He paid. She said, I will get the next one. He said, yes, you will. They walked to the elevator. Got in. The doors closed. 1 floor. 2. 3. She said, Hyun-soo. He said, Zara. The elevator arrived at her floor. Doors opened. She stepped out. Turned back. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who has decided tonight is not the night. She was looking at him with the expression of a woman who has the answer waiting and is not giving it tonight. The doors began to close. She said, good night. He said, good night. The doors closed. She stood in the corridor. Down in the lobby, her assistant was sitting with his assistant comparing schedules for the following day. Her assistant said, she moved all her Friday meetings. His assistant said, he canceled his Saturday site visit. They looked at each other. Her assistant said, how long have you worked for him? His assistant said, 6 years. You? Her assistant said, 4 years. Has he ever canceled a site visit before? His assistant said, once. His mother's birthday. Her assistant said, she has never moved all her meetings for anything. They sat with that information for a moment. His assistant said, should we do something? Her assistant said, absolutely not. We document and we wait. These things resolve themselves or they do not. Our job is to manage the calendars. His assistant said, and the restaurant reservations. Her assistant said, and the restaurant reservations. Saturday. Last full day. They both independently decided to have breakfast in their rooms. Both of them arrived at the dining room entrance from opposite corridors at the exact same moment, stopped, looked at each other, and both turned around. Their assistants, watching from the lobby, looked at each other. His assistant said, I am going to need a coffee. Her assistant said, I ordered one for you. I could see this coming from Tuesday. Saturday afternoon. Hyun-soo's site visit to the waterfront development. He told his assistant the time in a voice carrying no particular emphasis. Zara arrived at 3:15. He was looking at the water when he heard her on the boardwalk. He gave it 4 seconds. He turned. He said, you happen to be in the area. She said, waterfront infrastructure integration is directly relevant to 3 of our current market expansion plans. He said, of course it is. He showed her the development, not for investors, for someone whose opinion he actually wanted. He told her about the community integration problem he had been unable to solve for 2 years. She said, I solved a version of this in Lagos in 2021. I will send you the brief. He said, Zara. She said, do not. He said, I have not said anything yet. She said, I know what you are going to say. He said, then you know I am right. She said, you are frequently wrong. He said, not about this. She said, nothing. He said, we are 2 people who have built everything we have by knowing exactly what something is worth the moment we encounter it. We are standing here pretending we do not know what this is worth. She said, I do not need anyone. He said, neither do I. Needing and wanting are completely different things. You built your company because you wanted to, not because you needed to. Wanting something is not weakness. Wanting something is how everything worth building begins. She looked at the water. Something in her expression moved. Then she straightened. She put the expression back. She said, good night, Hyun-soo. She walked back along the boardwalk. He watched her go. He booked a Lagos flight for Thursday. He did not tell anyone why. Ladies and gentlemen, your captain speaking. Pre-landing announcement. We are beginning our final descent. One passenger has just walked away from the most significant thing she has encountered in 8 years of building an empire. The other passenger has just booked a flight to her city without telling her. Tray tables up. Hearts open. We are almost there. Sunday, 6 a.m. Zara at her window. Bags packed. Car at 9. Flight at noon. She told herself Seoul was a significant business trip. She did not believe it. She thought about adequate, about unrelated reasons, about a flawed building and a man who knew exactly what was wrong with it and had signed off on it anyway and had never told anyone until her. About wanting something is how everything worth building begins. She sat still for 30 minutes. Then she paced. Zara Mensah did not pace. She paced for 4 minutes. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up, put it down, picked it up and called him. 2 rings. He answered immediately. He said, "I was wondering how long that was going to take." She said, "Do not be smug." He said, "I am always smug. You knew that Tuesday." She said, "I called about the community integration brief. I want to make sure I actually send it." He said, "Zara." She said, "Yes." He said, "It is 6:17 in the morning." She said, "I am aware." He said, "You did not call at 6:17 to talk about a brief." She said nothing. He said, "Say what you called to say." Long silence. She said, "I do not do this." He said, "I know." She said, "I have never done this." He said, "I know that too." She said, "This is not practical." He said, "I have never built anything practical. Everything significant I have ever built started as impractical." She said, "Lagos to Seoul is very far." He said, "I have a plane." She said, "Of course you do." He said, "Zara." She said, "Yes." He said, "Stop making arguments against something you have already decided." The longest silence yet. Then she said, "I fly at noon." He said, "I know." She said, "There is a coffee place 2 streets from the hotel. Opens at 7. He said, "I will be there at 6:55. She said, "I said 7. He said, "I know." 6:55. She almost smiled. She said, "Do not be late." He said, "I am never late." She said, "I know." "Good night, Hyun-soo." He said, "See you at 7, Zara." She ended the call. She stood at the window, and Zara Mensah smiled. A real one. Full. Completely unmanaged. The kind she never let anyone see. Nobody saw it. But it was the most genuine expression that had crossed her face in longer than she could accurately remember. He was there at 6:55 with 2 coffees already ordered. She arrived at 7 exactly. He handed her one. She tasted it. It was exactly right. She said, "How did you know?" He said, "I pay attention to things that matter." She said, "You booked a flight to Lagos." He said, "How do you know that?" She said, "My assistant talks to your assistant." He said, "I need a serious conversation with my assistant." She said, "Thursday." He said, "Yes." She said, "I have a board meeting Thursday morning." He said, "I know. I checked your public schedule." She said, "That is concerning behavior." He said, "Or thorough preparation." She said, "You are going to be very difficult." He said, "You have no idea." She said, "I have 6 days of data." He said, 6 days is preliminary." She said, "I am good at preliminary assessments." He said, "So am I." "Mine have been accurate so far." She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them smiled. Both of them were smiling on the inside so completely it was almost visible anyway. Her car arrived. She said, "The flawed building." He said, "Yes." She said, "Fix the east facade. Stop intending. Start doing." He looked at her with the expression of a man who understands that she is talking about more than the building. She got in the car. The car pulled away. He stood with his coffee and watched it go. Then he texted his assistant. "Confirm Lagos flight. Find out who her favorite architect is." His assistant replied in 40 seconds. "Why do you need her favorite architect?" He put his phone in his pocket. He finished his coffee. He had a Skyline to finish. And at 32,000 feet heading home, Zara Mensah looked out the window at the clouds below and was completely still. Not the 15-minute ritual. For the first time in 8 years of building alone, she was thinking about what it might feel like to build something with someone else. The thought did not frighten her the way she expected. It felt like the most interesting project she had ever been offered. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have landed. I hope you enjoyed the flight. 2 billionaires. 2 empires. 1 city. A love that neither of them was willing to name until a 6:17 a.m. phone call on a Sunday morning made the naming inevitable. They never bowed for anyone. They never will. But somewhere between a wrong room, a rooftop dinner, a waterfront at sunset, and a coffee at 7 a.m., they found the one thing more powerful than either of their empires: each other. Welcome to Afro Soul Tales, the home of African Korean love stories that touch the deepest part of who you are. Subscribe right now and turn on your notification bell. New story every Friday. Every single one built for you. Drop a comment right now. Tell me where you are watching from tonight. What city? What country? What corner of this world this story found you in? And tell me who broke first. Zara calling at 6:17 or Hyun-soo booking the Lagos flight without telling her? I have my answer. I want yours. Like this video right now if this story gave you everything you came for tonight. Share it with one person who deserves a love story that does not ask either person to be less than everything they are. God bless you. We will see you on the next flight.